NBA free agency just opened, and with deals happening rapidly, 84 trades have already occurred since just before the window began. I'll quickly review them with you. On some of them I'll pause and talk more because I think they're more important or less important, and some of them I'll skip completely. A classic example of things I'm going to completely ignore from now on: D'Angelo Russell exercising his player option. In the Wizards, a few days before the start of the trade window, Colin Gillespie extends his contract with the Suns for 4 years at $48 million. In my opinion, it's a good signing for the Suns, especially considering what he brings to the table. Aaron Wiggins moves from the Thunder to Atlanta. A strong rotation player was traded for just 2 second-round picks. Isaiah Joe was also sent to Detroit. We'll discuss that soon. I think, at least in my opinion, Oklahoma didn't want to trade them to a team that would compete against them in the West, but they had to move them to get the money off their salary cap. They paid a crazy luxury tax. CJ McCollum extends his contract for another season with the Hawks. Trae Young signs for 4 years with the Wizards in a deal that's so Wizards, giving $212 million over 4 years to a player like Trae Young. Honestly and truly, I hope for their sake that it works out. Ayo Dosunmu extends his contract with Minnesota for $112 million over 5 years, about $22 million per season. Good move for them, and it's just the start of what Minnesota has done. We mentioned Minnesota, Randle, Julius Randle. I didn't get to discuss that he moved to the Nets. Minnesota wanted to clear salary, and the Nets get someone like Julius Randle for Claxton. To me, that's practically free. They also moved up 5 spots in the last draft, and Julius Randle is a player who has value. In my opinion, he actually proved in Minnesota specifically that he has more value than he even had during his time with the Knicks, when he was a bit stuck, let's put it that way, and was considered a player who put up empty stats, a player who doesn't make the playoffs, who stands out for playing hard in the regular season. The Nets are continuing to accumulate assets both to try to be competitive in the coming years and to have assets to trade with. I'm not discussing the Amelo and Giannis trades here since I covered them in another video. Austin Reeves signs a 4-year, $185 million contract, getting the max from the Lakers. In my opinion, they're paying him a lot more than they wanted to, but they have to keep him because they need someone next to Luka, and they can't afford to let him go, especially since there are teams that would jump at the opportunity and, according to rumors, would also offer him the max. It does limit their options in the coming years. We'll discuss that soon regarding other moves they've made. Mark Williams re-signs with the Suns on a 3-year, $38 million contract, according to him. Mark Williams still has great potential to be a significant center in the league, even though injuries have been holding him back so far. It's not such a big risk for Phoenix, especially with a contract like this, and especially for 3 years. Kobe White signs with the Hornets. I like that he stayed, especially after they traded LaMelo Ball and made him the main guard. That's Joe, a player I personally really hoped would move to a team like Portland. He's moving from the Thunder to the Pistons as well. They're dumping the salary, in my opinion, for a player they like. Yes, he's a legitimate rotation player on almost any NBA team, an excellent and very consistent shooter, in exchange for 2 second-round picks. This is a great addition for the Pistons for almost nothing, just like I said about Aaron Wiggins for almost nothing. They're adding a strong rotation player from a winning culture, and I think Oklahoma preferred sending them east instead of west, as I mentioned. Oklahoma also benefited from keeping Isaiah Hartenstein on a 3-year, $75 million deal. I think that's a bit of an overpay, but the team needs him. Alvarado's contract is a huge bargain. Murray signed with the Knicks for 3 years, $14 million, a bargain compared to what Alvarado brings off the bench as a team player. I feel like he could have gotten more money elsewhere, but he stayed in New York and stayed in a winning situation. A trade of Miles Bridges from the Hornets to the Suns. Bridges is traded in exchange for Royce O'Neal and Grayson Allen, plus a 2029 first-round pick and a 2033 first-round pick that are basically just swapping hands between the teams. In my opinion, the Hornets are going all in on Kuepel and Brandon Miller here. It could even be that trading Bridges will set them back, but I remind you that Bridges was in a very problematic situation with the Hornets after what happened to him personally with his wife and so on. They somehow managed to get something out of him by keeping him. Royce O'Neal is a player who really fits them, and Grayson Allen brings a winning culture. These are players who, by the way, don't need the ball. They can play well off the ball and will make room for the players who already have the ball there, especially after LaMelo Ball's departure. It's clear where this team is headed, but it's not necessarily going to help them in the immediate future. Moving on, Fred VanVleet is also exercising his player option. Harden is opting out, but he will most likely sign. Cleveland, Zach LaVine is exercising his $49 million player option, which is probably money he wouldn't get elsewhere. Draymond Green is declining his player option, and there are also rumors about LeBron James. We'll talk about that in a moment. Sandro Mamukelashvili is opting out of his player option with the Raptors and eventually signs with the Lakers, a player I really wanted to see come to Portland. In my opinion, he could be an excellent backup center. Josh Minott is staying in Brooklyn on a 2-year low-cost deal. It's low risk, high reward for Brooklyn, and Minott is still trying to find his place in the league. He had a pretty good season last year. The second year is a team option, so they keep the option to cut him with no problem if things don't work out this year. Day'Ron Sharpe is staying in Brooklyn on a 2-year $20 million deal with the second year as a team option just like before. DeAndre Ayton has opted into his $8 million player option, and it's amazing to see how much Ayton's value has dropped. It's just crazy. It also suggests he believes with evidence that no team will pay him $8 million, which is surprising. A first overall draft pick with great potential, but his motivation is always lacking. Malachi Smith, who had some nice games at the end of the season with Ben Seraph, for those who remember, will also stay for another season in Brooklyn. Andrew Wiggins is going to sign a new contract in Miami, which means he's going to take a certain pay cut. He was supposed to get $30 million, but apparently he also knows that no one will pay him $30 million again. But he did take a 3-year contract for $64 million with Miami to stay there for the next 3 years and play alongside Giannis. Thomas Bryant stays as the backup center for Cleveland, and come on if you have aspirations, Thomas Bryant. The Hawks are not exercising the option on Kuminga and are making him a free agent. Brook Lopez will continue with the Clippers for another season, but judging by the direction the Clippers are heading after Kawhi's departure, it's very possible that he might still be traded. However, he will stay with the $9 million contract, which is a relatively convenient contract for a contender to maybe bring him in as a backup center. And if you've made it this far, I want to remind you that this video is not sponsored, so I also want to remind you to give a like, subscribe to the channel, and when we do the World Cup final at the big community event, you're invited to check out the tickets below, which include drinks or popcorn and more huge surprises that will happen during the event. You're welcome to come celebrate this historic event with us. Anyone who attended the previous events knows exactly what the standard is. Lu Dort continues with the Thunder for another season after they picked up their team option on him for $17 million. Landry Shamet continues with the Knicks on a $24 million contract for 4 years, which is a very convenient deal both for Landry Shamet and for the Knicks. Landry Shamet at times looked like he was on his way out of the league. See how things change after one good playoff series. Julian Champagny, who made a huge leap in San Antonio and was part of their run this year, signs a contract worth $45 million for 3 years. And it's really nice to see because the Spurs had a team option to pay him only $3 million this year, and they basically declined the team option in order to extend his contract for $15 million. In my opinion, it's a steal for them compared to his value, and he proved that he's absolutely an excellent two-way player, a true 3-and-D, a great shooter, and fits their DNA very well. At a $15 million per year contract, it's an absolute bargain right now. Jusuf Nurkic is extending his contract with the Jazz, especially after Walker Kessler is leaving them. They need centers, so they're keeping a center who already knows them on an $11 million per season contract. Not the ideal solution for Utah in my eyes, to be honest, but the salary isn't that high, so I guess Utah sees the relatively safe value that Nurkic can bring compared to the risk and said, it's worth it for us. Kevin Huerter signs a 3-year, $27 million contract with Detroit. Yes, it's also very niche, but his ability to shoot on the move or come off screens, run off screens, and space the floor as a player who can shoot threes is very important for many teams. His problem is, of course, in the playoffs, and we saw that with Detroit. They extend his contract, still believe in him, and need more shooting on the team. Moving on, Kristaps Porzingis returns to the Warriors for $40 million over 2 years. In my opinion, he also wanted to return to Golden State, and you don't necessarily need him as your starting center, or at least as a center who plays 30 minutes, let's put it that way. He showed this year he can't stay healthy, but he still has value in the league. Harrison Barnes re-signs with the Spurs for 1 year at $8 million. To me, he was the key missing piece in the playoffs. They got a replacement, but I think he'll end up as a bench or even marginal player since the team is so deep. Ja Morant is moving to Portland, we've talked about that enough. Simone Fontecchio signs a 1-year contract with Miami. They obviously need spacing there with Giannis, and that's what he brings. Robert Williams re-signs with Portland after uncertainty about his future. Now, Robert Williams signs for $44 million for 3 years. This contract looks good compared to what Williams brings, and I like what he offers when healthy, but that's a big if. And the reason I'm a bit divided about his contract is because he plays as a backup center. He played about 17 minutes on average during this season and gave good production. But I've seen which players teams bring in and what kind of value you can get from players for exactly these amounts, and it bothers me that they didn't keep another player or that other players are leaving the board, going to other teams and not coming to Portland. Because in the end, we have to remember that this is a player who doesn't play a lot of minutes and also usually doesn't play back-to-backs, if at all, and that's a problem, it has to be said. LeBron James isn't returning to the Lakers. We'll discuss it more, but it's unclear if he's going to Miami, Cleveland, or Golden State. I really hope he doesn't join Golden State. And I'm speaking to you as someone who has been a LeBron James fan for many years. I can accept a lot of things. I can accept him moving to Cleveland. Miami is fine. I don't really get it. But Cleveland, I would prefer to see him go back there because that's where he started. That's where he grew up. It's all good. It would close the story in a great way. It's amazing that he's still playing at all. But going to Golden State, in my opinion, I wouldn't want to see that. Golden State has been his bitter rival for so many years. Steph has been his bitter rival for so many years, even though there's tremendous mutual respect between them. And here I am saying it. If LeBron James goes to Golden State, I'll become their biggest hater. I hope they lose every game. Jokelyn Dale, the monster, signs with the Hawks for another season for $14 million. Kawhi Leonard returns to Toronto in exchange for Brandon Ingram, Gary Grady D, and first-round picks. They're giving up quite a few draft assets here with 2 unprotected picks in 31 and 33. And the first round swap this year, although I don't believe they'll actually swap first round picks with the Clippers this year, but still they gave it to them. And they're bringing in Kawhi Leonard in exchange for Brandon Ingram, who in my opinion is one of the most inconsistent players. A talented but inconsistent player, traded for someone who, when healthy, and he proved last year he can stay healthy for a full season, is extremely consistent. And in my opinion, that puts them, if he's healthy, as a team that can look at the East and say, we can get out of here again. They have a small window, especially with Kawhi, since he doesn't have much prime playing time left. Giro returning to Sacramento isn't very significant, but Ousmane Dieng signing a 3-year deal with the Bucks could be a steal. Let's give this a few years. Tim Hardaway Jr., another player I hoped might come to Portland as a shooter and floor spacer, signs for a season in Miami for $6.5 million. And then Carlson, who was one of the last players in Oklahoma's rotation and left them, signs with Portland for a year on a $2.5 million contract, a minimum contract. And I also don't really understand this, not because I don't like him as a player. He's a great player. He could be a really good fit. The problem is, if you believe he could be a really good fit, why are you signing him for just 1 year? Sign him for 2 years, with a team option for the second year, something that will give you some value the following year. Because it's clear that if he has a good season, they'll have to pay him, and a lot. But this is a center who shoots 36% from 3, a stretch 5, a player who can space the floor and give something completely different from what both Klingon and Robert Williams provide. Now you have that on the roster, while last year it was more of a duo. Even though Lillard had limitations, he was traded to Atlanta before the deadline. Keon Ellis signs as a free agent with Brooklyn, further loading up the guard position in Brooklyn. In my opinion, they're really going to play with 2 or 3 guards on the court at almost all times. Will this hurt Ben in the end? I don't think so, because Keon Ellis may be a god, but Brooklyn is going to play with a lot of gods. They need to have a deep roster, and he's not a very dominant player at the guard position. I mean, he's more known as a defensive stopper. I don't know if Brooklyn will try to get away from that reputation that's been built around him. I'm not too worried about it. A 2-year contract, $18 million, even the contract itself doesn't put him in any high status, and still, in my opinion, there's no point guard in Brooklyn who's clearly above everyone else in terms of status, except for where they were picked in the draft. And that can change very quickly with good performance on the court. Luke Kennard signs with Phoenix. A 2-year contract, $13 million. I don't know how the Lakers didn't keep him on a contract like that, or how another team, a more competitive team, didn't snatch him up. Tyon Wade, a great player, signs with the 76ers, $39 million for 4 years, a little less than $10 million per season. He's an efficient player who proved himself in Cleveland and is now moving to Philadelphia, which is building a strong team. Bogdan Bogdanovic is moving to the Rockets after a bad year in which he was almost non-existent, signing for 1 season, and they need a player like him to spread the floor because they really need shooting. But how he fits defensively, someone who will definitely fit is Marcus Smart, who signed a 2-year, $6.5 million per season contract with a player option for the 2nd year. He fits them very well as a guard who isn't very dominant with the ball, an excellent defender, and a player who also knows how to shoot, although his shooting, let's say, I wouldn't count on it as something reliable. On the one hand, he can really explode on certain nights, and on other nights he can throw bricks, but he really fits the DNA they've built there. And in one of the most underrated moves of this free agency, John Collins signs with the Pistons on a 3-year, $51 million contract. Collins is an excellent stretch 4 in my opinion, who will really help a team like Detroit, which still isn't sure what it's doing with Jalen Duren. They're not ready to pay him the max. He wants the max. There might still be some kind of sign and trade there. There are even talks about Sabonis maybe in a sign and trade. But for now, John Collins with the Pistons is a great fit, an excellent player who, in my opinion, has been in some really bad situations in recent years in his career and can now get back to a winning situation, a good situation, especially now that he also has Cade Cunningham next to him. In short, I liked it, and it's similar to Robert Williams' contract. I think he could have fit well in Portland, especially as someone who can play the 4 or small ball 5. Norman Powell signed a 2-year, $45 million contract with the Bulls, which I disliked. The Bulls had the money, so he joined for the paycheck, not for a winning team. After 2 good years from him, he's just cashing out completely for the money. I didn't like it. He could have taken less money to be in a winning situation and a key player, but chose not to. Maybe they'll trade him later, and the Bulls... There's not much logic in it except signing him just to trade him later and use him as an asset. Next move, Nikola Vucevic moves to the Magic, a center who provides shooting, rebounding, very stable, on a 1-year contract for less than $4 million. No-brainer for them in my opinion. A player who, if he's willing to come off the bench after being so productive for so many years, and it's true he has his defensive issues, but offensively, he's an excellent asset, especially for a team that needs offense and already has enough defense. Mike Conley is leaving Minnesota to join the Celtics as a backup point guard on a one-year deal. Mo Wagner, the older brother of the Wagner family who also played with Avdija in Washington back in the day, recently suffered an ACL injury. He signs a 2-year contract after leaving Orlando, another $16 million in Brooklyn, and he's also supposed to be a team player. We need to remember that even though they're stacking up players, they have to have players on the roster. That means there's a certain minimum number of players you have to play with and players you have to pay. That's why they took a percentage for a player like Julius Randle, someone who won't cause harm, is positive in the locker room, and is expected to fit Fernandez's system. In the next big and surprising signing, Mitchell Robinson is moving to the Boston Celtics after winning a championship with the Knicks. In my eyes, it's a huge surprise to see him move to the Celtics. It's also not some huge salary upgrade from what the Knicks gave him last year. He made about $12 million, and here he's getting around $15 to $16 million per season for 3 years. Personally, it hurts me a bit to see him leave the Knicks, but they'll have to find a replacement center for him. The Celtics, seeking a center, are getting one here, but I'm unsure how reliable he'll be as their main center due to his ongoing health issues. Now let's discuss one of the biggest and strangest trades I've seen. Walker Kessler is being traded to the Lakers after basically finishing his contract this year in Utah 4 years into his rookie deal, which makes him a restricted free agent. This means that the Lakers can offer him a contract, but Utah can match it no matter what the contract is, so the power is still with Utah, and here they are taking full advantage of that power. For some reason, the Lakers have strong faith in Walker Kessler. Now, I really know that he has the potential, and he even showed at the beginning of this season that he can shoot from outside, but he didn't play at all this season because of an injury, and I don't know if he'll start next season. They paid 2 unprotected first-round picks for him in 2031 and 2033 and 2 first-round pick swaps in 2028 and 2030. That means the Lakers will have to be competitive in those years. They don't have first-round picks for the next 7 years after this, and they did it so Utah could pay him more and trade him $130 million for 4 years, which is a crazy overpay in my opinion. Even though he has huge potential to play next to Luka because he's a player who plays great above the rim, is a top rebounder and rim protector when he's focused, and he's also shown he can score. That's all true, it's all well and good, but what they're buying here is upside potential. They're not buying a proven player who's worth paying that kind of money for, in my opinion, or worth giving up 4 first-round picks for, which leaves them with 0 flexibility in the coming years. They did it, and right after they signed Sandro Mamukelashvili, which I personally like a lot more. That's a player I wanted to come to Portland, $52 million over 4 years, a player who can play stretch 5, even stretch 4 in certain lineups. He played 80 games last year for Toronto, which had several center injuries, and performed very well. At 27, you're getting a finished product and paying for it. Personally, I really like him as a player. In my opinion, he can fit in some of the lineups. Maybe I can even compare him a bit to Maxi Kleber, who Dallas had back in the day. Possibly even better, but a player who can space the floor from those spots. The next signing I like is Quentin Grimes joining the Lakers on a 4-year, $60 million deal. All these contracts they've signed with their players don't give them too much flexibility, but they're managing to recover nicely from the fact that LeBron James left them. Grimes and Luka know each other from their time in Dallas. They played together for a while, and in my opinion, he's getting a better opportunity here than the ones he's had so far. Because in Philly, he was always a secondary player, only getting chances when other players got injured, or at the end of the season during garbage time, he got his chance and he always proved himself, but then he would get some secondary role each time, and it could be that with the Lakers he'll get a more important role here. He can also score, he can play with the ball, without the ball, and in my opinion he can play a more important role as a key player in the second unit, in the second lineup, someone who can lead it. I like this signing for the Lakers. Colin Sexton, another good addition, signed for 2 years at $19 million. He'll likely be the 6th man off the bench, a role he knows well. Kelly Oubre is leaving Philadelphia to join the Pacers on a 2-year, $17 million deal. I really hope they wouldn't bring that player to Portland, not because he's bad, but because he doesn't fit. Jackson Hayes is leaving the Lakers for Utah on a 2-year, $12 million deal, as I mentioned before about Jusuf Nurkic. They'll likely share center minutes with Hayes as the backup. A transfer that I think is very underrated. Toby Tobias Harris signs with the Spurs for 2 years for $31 million. Toby Tobias Harris, I really rate him as a power forward who isn't an alpha. That's exactly his strength, not being the alpha, just being that solid guy. The player at the 3 or 4 position, whatever you need from him, he'll give you the rebound, he'll give you solid defense. He doesn't do anything at the highest level, but he's a very high quality veteran. He'll fit the Spurs really well. He's exactly the kind of player who can score 8 points in 30 minutes on the court and in another game score 20, whatever is needed from him. And now I'm moving on to the last signing that happened while I was recording here, and it surprised me even as it happened, but I just kept going with the video. The Boston Celtics are trading Jaylen Brown to Philadelphia in exchange for Paul George, 2 first-round picks, and 2 second-round picks. In my opinion, this trade is insane, completely insane. And it's even crazier to see how much Jaylen Brown's value has dropped from a player like Giannis to a player like Paul George, who you could say is not a top-tier player anymore. I don't like to use those terms, but he's definitely not the player he was in his prime. In addition to the fact that he hasn't shown he can stay healthy in the last 2 years, 41 games and 37 games, he's 36 years old, and if you look back 2 years, there's no indication he's going to play more in the coming years. Now, the interesting part of this story is the swap of a first-round pick in 2028 when both teams are probably still expected to be competitive, and an unprotected pick from Philadelphia in 2031, which might be the most significant asset here. 2 second-round picks don't really amount to anything anymore. Teams just give them away. In my view, this was a terrible trade by Boston. I'm not that impressed by Jaylen Brown, but I'm sure they could have gotten more for him. Simply, in my opinion, what happened is that because they went all in and thought they already had a real shot and had Giannis in the bag, they burned that bridge, you could say, and then the price kept dropping until they had to get rid of him because by then there was already bad blood within the team itself. A terrible move by Boston, very uncharacteristic for this team, and that's definitely a sure bet, 1,000,000% for a player who's considered top 10, top 15, or top 20 in the NBA today. It's far from that, and in my opinion, Boston sold low and they traded a player who's also 7 years younger than Paul George. I don't know, I can't understand it. By the way, from Philadelphia's perspective, in my eyes, it's a no-brainer trade, and they're getting Jaylen Brown, who has already shown he can be a secondary player, even though he wants to be the alpha, but he can be a secondary player to Tyrese Maxey, to Joel Embiid, gives them a lot more quality and depth. 10 out of 10, an excellent deal for them. That's the end of the first part of the signings and trades summary. Below is the link to our World Cup final. Join us for this big soccer event. We don't know the teams yet, but it will be fun. The link is below. Thank you for watching. I'm Yisrael Chai. See you later.